Okay, in this video, we're going to look at easy design principles for non-designers. So if you're designing a slideshow presentation or a graphic to use with your learners, we'll look at some just key principles that you can use to make sure it is clear and communicating effectively. So the 5 key principles that I'll talk about in this video are alignment, contrast, color, hierarchy, and space and balance. And we'll go through these one by one. Let's start with alignment because this is the quickest win that you can get to make something much more ordered, much more structured, and easier to read for your learners. So in this slide here, there is not a lot of order, there's not a lot of structure, and it's really hard to know where to look. Now, I've started aligning things a little more, and all of a sudden you can make a little bit better sense of it, but we can still do better. And this is kind of much cleaner now. It's got a clear sense of where I start reading and how I work through it. So by not having elements scattered all over the slide, I can navigate it much easier. So there are some really simple tools that you can use in PowerPoint or in other programs such as Adobe Express by using the Align tool. So this tool here will help you be able to align elements so that they line up in the middle or they all align over to one side. And importantly, I'm also going to point out you've got this distribute section here, and that's going to adjust the spacing between objects. So if I go back to my previous slide, so the distribute tool can help you distribute your text, your images, so that they are equally spaced from each other. And I think I've also used the alignment tool to make sure that the text is lining up with the center of that image. So a couple of really easy tools that are going to make your slides and images a lot easier to read. Okay, the next one is contrast, and it's really important for text in particular. My mantra for this one is a good contrast between light and dark helps keep text readable. So you can see we've got our first example here, which is just really clear, black on white, really high contrast, easy to read. Now, these ones down here, some of them you might not even be able to read properly. We've got dark on a darkish color, we've got light on light, and then we've got 2 similar colors together. So we've got a kind of mid yellow on top of a light yellow, and that's going to be really difficult for some people to read, particularly if you've got different eye conditions or color blindness conditions. And the last one down here is like a reversal of that top one. So it's white on black. Again, really kind of high contrast and clear and easy to read. Now, one thing I will point out is that sometimes if you've got a lot of white space and just a little bits of black text, it can be stark on some screens, particularly if you're doing some online learning and doing a lot of looking at screens. So the black and white can be a little bit intense. You'll notice on this slideshow, I've actually toned down the background. So in most of these slides, it's just a slightly off-white color so that the contrast isn't so intense. But we can also use contrast to show emphasis between different elements. So if we've got some examples here, we've got a contrast of the color, we've got a contrast of the positioning, as well as here. And also in this image just above, there's a contrast also in the alignment. We're having something out of alignment. It's creating an emphasis there, as well as the color, of course. Now, let's talk about color. My mantra for color is that color is like chili. If it's intense, if it's a really intense color, you want to just use it sparingly. But if it's mild, you can spread it around a little bit more. Let me show you how. So, too much saturated color can become overwhelming. It's really hard to look at this image because there's so much color going on and it's really hard to read and to know where to look. It hurts my eyes. But small amounts of saturated color can help create emphasis. So when we look over here, we've got a small amount of bright red cushion. It's a common feature of interior design, having these little splashes of intense color to help create emphasis, interest, and draw your eye. Now, so that was a little bit of the hot chili, where we used it sparingly. We have muted colors as well, which we can use in larger areas without it clashing or becoming overbearing. So think of this as a much more kind of mild chili that you can spread around a little bit. So these muted colors here, they've got a lot of white added to them, and there might be like grayed down versions of our saturated colors. If I compare this one here with a saturated version of the same kind of pattern, you can see immediately it's really quite hard to look at and is overbearing. So when you come to using this in PowerPoint or Word or whatever you're going to use, you've got a range of colors that you can choose from. Now, the bright colors that sometimes appear right up the top are good for those bold headings, those dominant elements where you might be drawing some attention to the content. And it's these muted colors here that are more like your mild chili. They're softer colors that we can use in larger areas without it becoming overbearing. Now, often you've got these standard colors here, and these are the super bright saturated colors. I would really use these very sparingly, only for small areas of highlights and emphasis. If we have a look at this example here, this is the 3 chili super saturated version. And you can see in my text here, it's really hard to know what to look at. It's kind of hard for me to focus and actually kind of read through this text. So although bright colors can attract your attention, it's really hard for me to keep my attention in that space. So let's dial it down to our muted, nice, mild 1 chili, where I've used some color to create some differentiation between the tables in this document, to create a little bit of emphasis on these are the headings and this is the content. But if you wanted to spice it up a little bit more, we can add a small amount of emphasis and go for our 2 chili version, where we're using some saturated colors to create emphasis on key areas. So yes, we want to know that this is current and spaces suitable for dance. Great. Okay, so now let's look at hierarchy, which is the way that we arrange our information within the picture plane to designate, what is the most important bit of information. So you can see here, I've got this pyramid here with obviously the most important pieces at the top. And again, that's the same with documents and how we read. So I've got my nice heading at the top. It's been given a color there to make sure that it is it's highlighted, and we know that that is the main heading. And then we've got subheadings. So we're indicating this visually by having a clear heading to announce the topic. We've got the size and placement of info. So we go from a large heading to a subheading to our normal text, and we can easily progress through that. And then you might also come across sub-hierarchies. So in terms of this little sentence that I've got just down the bottom here, which is my little thinking note, how can you indicate this visually? And so within that sentence, I've circled visually just to give that a little sub-hierarchy. That is the most important word in this sentence. And that's going to create our senses of emphasis. So emphasis on our keywords here, and of course, emphasis on our heading. The last one I want to talk about is space and balance. And that's about giving your content room to breathe and avoiding overcrowding it. If we look at this slide on the left here, it's kind of the same content as the one on the right, but this is overbearing. There's too much there. It's in all caps, and there's no room for us to kind of breathe and process it. When we look at the one on the left, we've gone much more concise. We've given a clear heading, lots of space there so that we can actually take in the information, and we've paired up a bit of text with a nice image to help illustrate what this topic is. So when you're dealing with images and text together, it can be hard to make sure you get a balance of everything in there. One thing that I tend to use a fair bit is using the crop to shape tools on PowerPoint or in other programs to help give some breathing room. And you can go to that through the crop menu and go to crop to shape, and I'll show you this transformation here. So by using a circle, it means that I've just honed in on the central information. I've given myself a lot more free space around the image to help add breathing room, and it's also cutting out unnecessary detail. So if I didn't need to see the second person in that image and I just wanted to hone in on one area, then that crop has been effective. The other thing you can do is use animations to reveal one point at a time. This prevents overcrowding, as well as when you're introducing a new slide and you've got 4 or 5 bits of information. sometimes it's going to ease the cognitive load of a learner to just reveal those points one at a time. So going from the first simple point to then revealing the next point that you want to talk about. Great. So those are our 5 key principles: alignment, contrast, color, hierarchy, and space and balance. So let's quickly test out what you remember and see what's wrong with this next slide. Okay, so this slide is a little bit of a mess. There are some things everywhere. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about space and balance, hierarchy, color, contrast, and alignment, and think about what you would do to make this image easier to read. Now, let's have a quick look at, and look at that terrible dorky animation there. If we look at this slide, this is a quick revision of that, and I'm trying to keep it really simple. Hierarchy of information with the name at the top instead of the name of my dog at the top. And then the key information, so starting with professional information, I'm using the animations function to reveal one point at a time. So I'm saying, yes, I'm positive and creative. As I would talk more and more, I'm saying I've got over 15 years at CIT. And finally, I love my dog. And I can elaborate on that as I talk if I like and tell you the name of the dog. But I'm just trying to keep the amount of text on this slide to a minimum. So there are your 5 key principles, which you can apply to your slides and graphics to make your learning materials much more effective.